Stu Fulton here in Japan, sending you the best news, reviews, previews, interviews, all the views from the land of the rising sun, pro wrestling, pro grappling, kickboxing, mixed martial arts, and especially a focus on those who are responsible for releasing the Kraken. This is Kraken Chronicles. Stu Fulton here in Japan, talking MMA, wrestling, kickboxing, pro grappling, and bringing you stories of those athletes and fighters who have that inner warrior and they pulled it out for the masses. They brought legendary stories. They unleashed the beast. They released the Kraken. And today we have another story for the Book of Chronicles here on Kraken Chronicles. Joining me again today in this short series of Japanese combat sports history is writer, competitor, philosopher, commentator, Keith Vargo. Welcome back, Keith.
Hey, Stu. Great to be here again.
Man, we have so many stories from that Kakutogi Boom, that boom era, the golden era. We could just talk for days and days about this stuff. But today, another one which relates to a chapter of your new book, Shockwave 2002, one of the biggest Pride shows in martial arts history. It was something else.
Well, it was the biggest show ever in, combat sports, martial arts, and actually may still be, because I don't know, like if you remember the range, like there was like the promoters said it was 90,000 people, whereas other people said closer to 70,000 people. But I'm like, even with 70,000 people in a stadium, that is the biggest show ever, and that was 2002.
Yeah, 2002. Yeah, it does range in numbers when you look online, 70 odd thousand. But I remember in the stadium that day, it was somewhere during the show, they made an announcement of the numbers that were in. It was like a rough number they had, and it was already at about 80 odd thousand, maybe 88,000 at that point. So yeah, either way, 70 to 90,000, that's still a huge number of people. I mean, we were at the Tokyo National Stadium, the Kakutogi Boom, and just going there, swarms of fans. We rocked up in the car trying to find a parking space, and I remember passing Ensign Inoue, and that was when he was still with Miyu Yamamoto, and her son Urson, who went on to fight on the same rising card as his mother when he became an adult. He was still a kid in the car, so that was just arriving, and then the amount of people around the stadium, I'd never seen anything like that for a martial arts event. I mean, even the big Pride shows at the Saitama Super Arena, I mean, that was a lot of people, a sea of people, really, you would go in to the Saitama Super Arena and see. But at the National Stadium that day, which is an open air stadium, that was another new thing. Just so many people. And a lot of people forget it was, I'm saying was, it pretty much still is. Those big shows were like a family affair. You would see families going with their kids. It wasn't like MMA shows at the same time, that same era back in 2002. It was just a different vibe altogether. Massive.
Well, yeah, like overall, that's one of the things like folks generally don't know about, like the martial arts, the shows here is like you might go to New Japan Kickboxing, right? And the morning will be the amateurs. And like all the amateurs will be there and their families will be there watching them, and they just stay until the evening, just like a sumo show, and then the pros start. And it's like you said, it's kind of a family thing, and family and friends, and they fill up arenas like that, with the regular size arenas like 30,000 people. So it's got that whole family vibe. And then when it came to the biggest show ever, K1 and Pride together, and the first time they really, put together a gigantic card where, like Don Fry used to say, every fight on a Pride card could have been a main event. this is what he was talking about, you know, like this kind of show, you know.
Yeah. So yeah, let's run this back. Pride Shockwave 2002, August the 28th of 2002, and one fight in particular will stick with me until the grave. That huge battle between Nogueira and Sapp, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, and Rodrigo Nogueira. I just mentioned his brother there just now, and Bob Sapp. That was, that's going to go down in history as a game changer for not just heavyweight mixed martial artists, but combat sports as a whole.
Oh yeah. We'll get to the fight in a minute, but like, you know, just talking about those guys, you know, okay, starting off with Bob Sapp, right? You know, he was, you know, coming into this fight, you know, he was kind of this thing, you know, that he had generated this enormous buzz because, you know, like, he had a lot of factors that made him fan friendly and popular because he's kind of a nice guy. He's funny, got a good sense of humor. He was great on the camera, but he was an enormous human being, you know, and like I'm 6 feet tall, right? And it's like people don't understand, like I, you know, normally I'm kind of a tall guy here, and even in America, I'm average, you know, kind of thing, 182 centimeters, 6 feet tall. In those rooms, standing next to those guys, I am teeny. You know, I'm small next to Nogueira, and Nogueira is small next to Sapp. You know, so you know, Sapp is just this enormous human being, like something like 350 pounds with abs. You know,
yeah.
He had fought a couple of fights coming into this, just bludgeoned Yoshihisa Yamamoto. Like Yamamoto is like a good journeyman fighter. Took Hickson like 20 minutes, and like, was it one of the Vale Tudo shows back in the mid 90s? And yeah, he's a solid journeyman. He's a big guy, right? And Sapp just bludgeoned him in his debut in Pride. Just every punch was just like, I don't know, like hitting someone with a baseball bat. And then, you know, I don't know what was up with that, but you know, Kiyoshi Tamura was like, hey, I want to try that. And well, I can't remember exactly how long was that, Stu? Like 10 seconds or something?
11 seconds. He absolutely
11 seconds.
steamrolled him. Absolutely steamrolled.
Yeah, he just it's like ding across the ring, and just Sapp blasts him off his feet and started punching him into oblivion. And just like the referee, you see the referee is like, they just stopped it right away because it just looked too dangerous, right? And this enormous buzz coming in was, oh man.
Yeah, that Kiyoshi Tamura fight, 11 seconds of Bob Sapp, a bull in a china shop. There was an argument that it was an early stoppage because Tamura wasn't completely out. But I think they made the right decision because they didn't really want to see a death in the ring, you know, with that size and weight difference. I mean, there must have been Sapp must have been double his body weight, to be honest, at that time.
Oh, easily. I probably more, you know, because Tamura was really truly like middleweight, maybe light heavyweight at best. You know, if you go by boxing weight categories, he was, you know, a great fighter, but he was not like a super heavyweight, not even close to heavyweight, like true heavyweight, like Sapp. You know, like Sapp is a true, genuine super heavyweight. I mean, I remember him in interviews saying that he was so big that if he missed a meal, he got lightheaded. You know, like that's just the energy requirements to keep his body going because it was so enormous. And they'd show, you know, like him eating his meals on TV and just shoveling in the calories just to keep him going at that size, you know, like as an athlete, you know.
Well, he had a background in, you know, the NFL, I believe. So, you know, he'd come from a sports background, and his brother too. Is that right?
I'm not sure about that. I know he was. There's a guy named Warren Sapp that was in the NFL, but I'm not sure if they're related. Like that's one would have to look into because I've been following NFL for a while.
anyway, you had this big guy who could move. He could move his body. He'd only just learned, the basics of mixed martial arts, so it was never going to be a technical game with him. He wasn't a technical fight. It was just sheer brute force,
Oh yeah,
power,
yeah,
and strength.
yeah. And to your point, he had enormous power, but he was new to fighting, so he was a little awkward, you know. And you saw that in his first two fights, even with Tamura, where he just obliterated him right away. He was still like, it looks like those kind of wheeling punches, and not clean technique because like he's new to it, right? But it didn't matter because someone swinging a baseball bat clumsily is still someone swinging a baseball bat, and that's what his punches. Every punch was not like a normal human punch. It was just an order of magnitude more powerful.
Yeah, he could hit so hard that he'd turn your glasses into contact lenses. He was something else, really, really something else. And he was larger than life that year. I mean, I think he had about 10 fights in total in 2002. So he was active on these big shows, but he was also all over the TV. You'd see him on commercials, doing music, doing variety shows, game shows. You'd see his face on the back of, on the front of, potato chips and all kinds of foods on vending machines. Just everywhere you looked, you would see Bob Sapp's face.
Yeah, like I probably told this story before, but the thing that was funniest to me was like, he's reached a saturation point where, it wasn't just that you saw him on TV and, in print ads or whatever. I remember cardboard cutouts at the local electronics store where he was like, was hawking a CD player or something. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, just his enormous cutout like that. But I remember going to work in the morning and, in Japan, most people or in Tokyo at least, most people are riding trains, right? And there's like little turnstiles, right? And you take your card, you go through the gate, and on all the turnstiles there were little pictures of Bob Sapp. And I can't even remember what he was selling, but there's these little micro ads, and it was like I can't even go to the work in the morning when I swipe my card without seeing Bob Sapp. And it was like he was everywhere.
Yep, literally everywhere. It's no exaggeration. You would just turn on the TV or walk out into public, and yeah, you'd see him or hear about him. But he was, he was loved by the media and the fans, the fight fans, and the general public. Really warmed to him because he was this frightening figure of a fighter in the ring. Who would just go in and absolutely steamroll his opponents. But outside of the ring, really softly spoken, well spoken, just so lovable. Anybody who ever spoke to him knew immediately he was a nice guy, a lovely guy.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where a lot of fighting is about who you are, right? And so outside of the ring, he's this nice guy, right? And it's not like that completely stops when he goes in the ring. In the ring, he's still trying to be that guy, who's going to go in there and beat someone's, brakes off. But some fighters have like a core meanness to them, and that's like kind of what generates that. And he, in spite of his overwhelming size and power, that was one of those things. Like he seemed to struggle to be that guy, to really, be that mean kind of thing.
Yeah, it was almost like he was just kind of thrown into this world of fighting, and he really realized he had this chance with all the support around him to make some money and do something fun, and just kind of got caught up in the tidal wave of it all,
Well, you see, that's the thing. It's like, you're right. He was definitely riding, the opportunity that he had. But to your point, the media loved him, but he loved the media. He really loved being a celebrity and fame, and down to the micro level that, I remember being backstage after his debut, Yoshihisa Yamamoto, and he went in there, he fought a good fight, easily won. But I remember backstage, it's like, you have your interview, everybody asks a bunch of questions, and the fighter usually goes off to the locker room, right? And he stepped off to the side, and the reporters were still like following him. And he was like, oh, well, he keeps talking to them and they're taking pictures with him and he's posing and he's doing, like all this stuff kind of stuff. And they kept taking pictures and kept asking questions. And I remember like there's this moment where like his coach, Marty Smith, is like, okay, son, oh, that's enough. Come on, let's go. He can't even hear him because he's having this great moment with the press, and he's doing like these splits on the ground because he was just enormously athletic, right? Just the perfect wide splits like Van Damme or something. Like, oh, and they're all taking pictures and they're all asking him more questions, and it was just like it took him forever just to get from the interview space into the locker room, because like he loved the attention and they loved him. And that little microcosm of his debut in Pride, that little backstage thing, that is what he was like his entire time here. That there was that feedback loop between the two, of the fans and the press, and his own enjoyment of celebrity.
He's what we would refer to in the UK as a media darling. It sounds quite strange to label him because he's such a huge beast of a man, but they really did love him, and the whole country warmed to him. Immediately. Right, let's get into this match, this release of the Kraken, of which there hasn't been since, in my opinion. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, already on top of the world as a heavyweight mixed martial artist with a BJJ background, so he had a grappling background, and he caught my eye very quickly because I'm also a heavyweight, so to see a heavyweight work off his back like that and get submission after submission against incredibly dangerous opponents. I mean, there was a time where he took triangle choke, Sankakujime, the leg triangle choke, 2 in a row, was it not, over opponents, Mark Coleman and Gary Goodridge.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, those like it was an arm triangle and then triangle chokes one after that. Ensign Inoue as well. I had never seen a heavyweight, and sorry about this, Ensign, but toy with Ensign on the ground, on the mat, in a way that Nogueira did before.
Yeah, Nogueira was the guy. Most fans became aware of him with Pride because his big thing, his big accomplishment before Pride was that he did really well in the King of Kings tournaments, the Rings promotion, right? But for whatever reason, Rings never really had a great viewership, so a lot of people didn't see that, especially abroad. And then when he debuts in Pride, and he's basically he comes in and he very shortly becomes Pride's first heavyweight champion, and then he's the guy. He fought at that point between Rings and Pride, he fought everybody who was a top heavyweight until he meets Bob Sapp, right? And well, Fyodor comes later, but and that was like a Rings King of Kings kind of rivalry that didn't play out in that promotion, and eventually played out in Pride. But point is that meeting up with Sapp, it's like, who's left, who's next, that kind of thing, right? And there were some other guys, but he'd fought most of the top guys at that point,
But this was in a way, it was somewhat of a risk for Nogueira coming into this. It's not something that he would maybe consider as a risk, as more of a challenge. But when you think about the level of opponents that he'd put away to get on top of the mixed martial arts heavyweight world, taking this fight against Bob Sapp, who had just been steamrolling people with no skill and technique at all, just power and strength, it was somewhat of a risk for Nogueira to be toppled by someone who hadn't put in all the years and the numbers of fights and levels of fights that Nogueira had.
Oh, definitely a risk, because guys at that size, Nogueira's like half a foot taller than me, right? And it's hard to find people bigger than you when you're that size. And so I don't think he had encountered anybody that much bigger than him. You know, like there's guys like, you know, Bustamante and Hoist Gracie and all those other guys. Yeah, they fought lots of guys bigger than them because they were normal sized human beings. But no, like, I mean, that was a real risk. Nogueira had never fought anybody that much bigger than him before. And I don't think even he knew what was going to happen when he went into that fight.
No, and that's really the fundamental of Pride in K1 right there. What's going to happen? You know, that question. The size difference was frightening. I think Nogueira was giving up, you know, nearly 130 pounds, so 50 odd kilograms in weight difference. That puts a whole new lens on open weight, you know.
Yeah, and there was the whole thing of like skill versus size and strength, because you know a lot of people are like, oh, you know, skill is what really matters, you know, size and strength, they matter, they really matter, you know. And this was as writ large as it was going to get, you know, because Sapp is like pushing the limits of how big you can possibly be as a human being and still do something, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
that's it. This is as big of a size and a strength challenge as you're going to get.
Yeah. I think we also, at this stage, we have to frame it in terms of where Sapp was in his career, because, you know, later on in his career, there was rumors that he was throwing fights and, you know, not really trying, and, you know, you can put all that aside, because in the early throes of his career, he was dangerous and he was going out 100% and he was not giving up at all. Like I said, you know, he had something like 10 fights in that year of 2002, the year of this show. Some of them in K1. He beat Ernesto Host, who went on to become 4-time K1 World Grand Prix champion. He beat him twice that year. Yep. Nobody ever saw that coming. Even the rematch, they did not expect that Bob Sapp would take out somebody with the skill and you know, the name of Ernesto Host.
Oh yeah, and I remember that at the time. I mean, that was one of those two fights. I was like right there at ringside, and just like, it was this weird back and forth where, you know, Host was doing his thing. He's one of the best kickboxers ever. His technique is great. His power is great for his size. But, you know, Sapp was going in there trying to win, and you can see there was this kind of like, almost like anger. Host was like upset that, you know, like this upstart was in there with him and just trying to beat him, right? And then you see like Sapp was trying to win too, but he had this kind of desperation because he knew who he was in with, you know, a great fighter. And I remember like when he pinned him in the corner, I remember writing about it at the time, something like, it looked like a guy who was opening and shutting a door with a straight arm, you know, like hitting Host in the head with punches, just gah. And, you know, the referee just has to come in and stop it because it's just so much power. No matter how strange it looked, it was devastating, you know.
Yeah, those were basically like lariats in pro wrestling, or
yeah,
clotheslines, exactly. You know.
Yeah.
Just massive meaty arms that are bigger than most people's legs, swinging at you, you know, and taking them out. Anyway, we should probably revisit the Ernesto Host fights later. Let's get back to the fight in hand, because essentially Bob Sapp was on top of his game, you know, that year. He was really super dangerous. So we're in the arena. It's middle of summer in Tokyo, which is, you know, subtropical basically. It's hot, it's open air, and it's super humid. I had a towel with me. It was one of the only major events that I actually just bought tickets for and went with friends to watch. I had no other work duties. So I was there just fully enjoying myself, but, you know, sweating my ass off in the crowd. Nogueira and Sapp, the fight starts off, and of course Nogueira wants to take things to the ground, but Bob Sapp doesn't see it that way, does he?
Oh Jesus. Yeah, like he, you know, this was like a standard BJJ thing. You shoot in there, you get him on the ground, you do your thing. He shoots in there. Bob Sapp picks him up. This is like the first 5-10 seconds of the fight. Picks him up and just pile drives him right on his head, right? and I distinctly remember this at the time of like, and this was a kind of thing with Pride where I was like gasping, like, can he do that? You know, and that was like Pride was like that. They were always riding this edge. Like, is that? I mean, is that in the rules? You know, like I thought, you know, like you couldn't do that, but he did. You know?
Yeah, it was frightening because you know, as we both know, the fights were not orchestrated at all. So for a real power, you know, that kind of pile driver to happen real time and completely unscripted, was shocking. It was exhilarating, but it was frightening. I mean, you know, in all honesty, we could have seen a death. Second to that, we could have seen Nogueira become quadriplegic. You know, it very easily could have gone sour quickly. That opening sequence, frightening.
Yeah, I think he got lucky because when you watch the slow motion, you can see like his head comes down and just kind of slides a little sideways, and it's like his head and his shoulder just kind of go across, and so it kind of slides sideways, and so it's not directly on. So I think he got a little bit lucky there. But Nogueira learned his lesson because, you know, like Sapp immediately was like, oh, that seemed to work well, and he did it again. He picked him up, and but Nogueira's like, nah, and he's like, as Sapp's picking him up, he's like hanging onto that leg, like you're not going to get that clean power driver again, and that's the way it was. It's like Nogueira was like, okay, I'm gonna find a way to survive this and master this guy, kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the fight could have been stopped before the actual finish. You know, there was several sequences with Sapp, you know, stomping, jumping up, throwing basically his whole body weight with gravity on top of a downed Nogueira.
Yeah.
And
like,
yeah,
okay,
it
like,
really
you know, the
did
standard
look.
thing in BJJ where they say grab his feet, swing him to the side, and, you know, like land on him like in a side hold or a kesugatame, and it was like a normal one, but with Sapp's power, just like, boom, and just like right down on him, and it just looked like as soon as Sapp landed on him with that 350 pounds of muscle, it just looked like Nogueira just went, and everything came out of him, you know, and he did it multiple times.
Yeah. And incredibly, they went the full distance of the first round, which was 10 minutes, I believe, back when it was 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. And I remember seeing Bob Sapp go back to his corner, just sucking air, you know, really completely gassy. He'd just gone 10 minutes with the best heavyweight mixed martial artist in the world. And you know, with his bulk, his size, he was struggling to get oxygen to those muscles.
Straight up, man. I'll tell you what, like I can remember at the time we had joked that like Bob Sapp was kind of like Ultraman, that, you know, like he's a superhero for about a good 3 to 5 minutes, and then as soon as his like little light starts beep, beep, or on his chest, you know, like, and you know, it's like your time is up for being a superhero, and he's gassing, and he's in trouble, right? And he knows this, right? And so that's why he comes out like gangbusters and pile drives them, and he's just, I mean, it's hard to describe. Like, if you weren't there to viscerally feel like the sound coming from the ring of like his enormous fist just go on Nogueira's head inside of his guard. Oh, it just huge meaty socks, just kind of thing. And you're thinking like, there's no way he can survive this. And Nogueira, to his credit, he's squirming, he's struggling, he's trying to move his head, he's trying to get in better positions every time Sapp is putting him in a bad one. And then Sapp starts to suck wind, and it's like, oh, now it's switching back, right? You know, Sapp get a little, you know, like he'd get a little rest, then he'd turn it on again and start smashing him again. It was just this back and forth, you know.
So it went from the whole arena like, oh my God, Bob Sapp is just going to absolutely smash the heavyweight champion here and become new champion, to wait a minute, Nogueira's resilience is something else. He is hanging in there. He really has a chance here. So people are getting closer and closer to the edge of their seats. They go back to the towels for the the interval, the 1 minute, and then they come out for round two, and that's when everybody was primed for the real deal, the release of the Kraken.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing is like, Sapp tries to rally in that second round, but he's struggling, right? Because his little Ultraman light is beeping, right? He's run out, but he's still trying his best to lay it on him. And I remember there's these sequences where Nogueira keeps trying to do this sit out, and roll him over and get on top of him, and you see Sapp just is enormous. It just looks like like a strongman contest where they're trying to lift an odd object or something like that. Wow, kind of pushing him off, and Nogueira struggles to get back on him, and finally does, and he gets the armbar, right? But
well, that's the moment right there. We saw that last exchange. Bob Sapp was obviously digging deep. He had no quit in him at all back at that stage of his career. But the same could be said of Nogueira. He just had it in his mind that he was not going to be beaten by this guy who hadn't paid his dues in the martial arts world, and he was just a big strong guy. And that armbar, when he switched his hips over and got the extension on the armbar, I get goosebumps even just thinking about it right now. And then the tap, the whole stadium, like I said, I was in the crowd for this. The whole stadium stood. So we're all seated, right? Except from some of the people down near the ringside. We're all seated, but the whole stadium jumped out of their seats and roared at this victory. It was, goosebumps for days with that one, mate.
Yeah, because up until that last sequence, it's like Sapp was still in the fight. He was giving it what he had left, and it was going back and forth. It's like, maybe Sapp's gonna win, maybe not, and it was like edge of your seat, like from every moment. But I want to go back for a minute, like to tie these two things together. Is like, I can remember in the first round the moment where I thought that Nogueira's just a warrior, right? And I can remember the commentators at the time, like when I rewatched it, they were saying like, oh, Nogueira's punches aren't doing anything. It's like, no, Nogueira got off the ground after just getting his skull bounced off the mat with those gigantic powers. And I remember when they stood up again, Nogueira went right at him, just like 1-2 in the face, 1-2 in the face. And it was like, yeah, he didn't put him down. But like when I was saying, like I think Sapp at his heart isn't a mean guy, and he's not. You can see, like, I think that was the first time, because this is like only three fights into his pride into MMA, right?
That's the wild thing, right?
And Nogueira's a big guy too, and just putting him right, just because his accuracy is pretty good for a jiu-jitsu guy. His punches just right on Sapp's face, just 1-2, 1-2, and suddenly I'm like, oh, well, Nogueira's not going out like that, and then Sapp surged back, but it was like, this was a fight, and it went back and forth like that every time until that armbar at the end where Sapp literally had nothing left to resist,
Sapp was one of these guys, he was so big, so strong and powerful that even if he was on the bottom, back at that stage in his career, you wouldn't see him shrimp out or try to, retain half guard or full guard. No. He would just push the guy off him and get up.
Well, the word I would use is launch, but
yeah.
And in this fight, you saw it too. He did that to Nogueira. And oh Jesus, I remember there was one point where Sapp was on his back. And you see, oh, they're kind of like grappling, and then Sapp, I think he just suddenly realized or heard something from his corner. He was like, oh, kick, and he was doing these up kicks, and I thought he was just going to kick Nogueira's head off because Sapp's got these enormous thighs. I remember, and then he kicked him in the chest, and it was just like, I just kind of knocked him up and backwards, and oh yeah, it was unbelievable, like.
I always used to record the domestic broadcasts so I could watch them back later with the Japanese commentary, and they would of course they would put other little video snippets in on those that we wouldn't see in the arena. So when I watched it back, I remember right after the fight, Nogueira had said, this fight clearly shows I'm the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, and nobody was about to disagree with him. He's going backstage, and they always followed them with the cameras back then in the Pride days. And I remember they had subtitles up in Japanese because he and his cornerman were speaking in Portuguese, obviously. And he was asked, "Where does it hurt? Are you hurt anywhere?" And Nogueira was like, "Yeah, everywhere." It all hurts. It all hurts. I mean, he was just ragdolled for 10 minutes and then came back 4 minutes 3 of round 2 with that phenomenal armbar, showing that resilience, technique and skill really could off balance the weight and power disadvantage.
Yeah. And this is the thing, is that's what jiu-jitsu guys do, right? Like it's supposedly, like the selling point of jiu-jitsu is this is the skill you need to survive against someone who's bigger than you, who's stronger than you. What really made this fight as great as it was that like I was saying earlier, that this is an example of that as you will ever see, and probably you'll never see again, because they don't let those kind of size difference mismatches happen anymore, probably for a good reason. But yeah, like Nogueira's a big guy, and Sapp is a gigantic, pushing the limits of what you can do as a human, or how big you can be as a human and be an athlete, and Nogueira still did it. He still pulled it out, and you see in every exchange, like him doing what jiu-jitsu guys do. He's working off his back and he's going for a triangle, and Sapp tries to slam him out of it, and he's like, as Sapp's lifting him, he's like, "No, I learned my lesson that first," and he's hanging on to him, and he's bringing him back down, and he is just doing everything jiu-jitsu guys do, and everything that he was doing was necessary because of Sapp's relentless attacks and power,
Yeah, this really solidified Antonio Nogueira's status as a legendary heavyweight MMA fighter, that's for sure. But I wanted to just, before we wrap up, ask your take on the implications, what this fight and this show meant for Pride and for Japanese MMA, and then of course subsequently world MMA, which is the big beast it is now.
This was the high watermark, at a time with the Kakutogi Boom, was a time where 20 or 30,000 people at an event was, that happened every month or every other month kind of thing. And then this was like the 70 to 90,000, depending on who you hear, like filling up the stadium, and a stacked card with all of the best that you could get together in one place from both K1 and Pride. And it was literally like everything that in all of combat sports, the best of combat sports in Japan, all at once, with the maximum number of people. And I just don't think that there's been an event like this since. There's not that many great fights on a card, not that many people, not that much media attention. And sadly, I don't think it's going to happen again unless we get somebody who's going to be like a superstar like that, back in the day, or you get a surge in popularity, because the popularity with the fight sports in Japan was just off the charts at the time, And it was the high watermark for combat sports during the high watermark of combat sports in general in the world. That's what the Kakutogi Boom was. So this was the event in the era that was like the largest surge of talent and popularity and entertainment value, and just everything came together in that one show. I can't recommend it enough for people. If you want to see what the Kakutogi Boom era was like, go watch that show. You'll see all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Man, we saw Antonio Inoki parachute into the stadium at the halfway mark.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And I don't think this was announced at all. We had no idea this was going to happen. And then, suddenly, the cameras are looking up at the sky, and then there's this parachute, and it's Antonio Inoki parachuting into the national stadium during this event.
Yeah, like like a few years ago, there was like the Fan Man guy who interrupted like the heavyweight boxing championship, and I remember at first I was like, "Oh, is this gonna be one of those things again?" And then when the person lands, it's like it's Inoki, Total surprise. It was awesome,
Yeah, everything about that show and that fight we just talked about. It's really not difficult to see why it's still celebrated and talked about, 20 odd years later, like now.
Yeah, if you want to see a heroic fight on the biggest stage possible, like that was it. Nogueira was the man in the heavyweight division at the time, and he proved it with that fight. It's like, ain't nobody, don't matter how big they are, you throw at me, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna master that man, And I was like, I just remember it was like, it was like goosebumps after the fight. It was like, this guy is it. He is the champion,
Yeah. And if any of our viewers and listeners want to read and know more about these stories during the Kakutogi Boom, you have a new book out, Keith, which is the first in a new series of Kakutogi Boom, these fights and moments in history, right?
Oh, well, thank you for mentioning it. Yes. I got volume 1 out now, and that's like the kind of precursor to the whole series where, it kind of tells you about all the stuff we're talking about, setting the stage. And then volume 2 will be coming out this year, where we'll have the report that I wrote back at the time on this event and so many other events that made up the Kakutogi Boom. And then later on, we'll have volume 3 out that kind of is like the aftermath of that. But for right now, you want to see volume 1, it's out there. And then if you don't know anything about that era of fighting, that's the thing that'll kind of show you what it was about and give you a little bit of a taste of it.
It's fascinating stuff, Keith. Even for us who were there at the time for all of these moments in history, but for those who weren't there, know a little bit about it or nothing about it, it's a must read. It's an amazing slice of mixed martial arts history. So get on that book and join us again for another chapter in the Book of Chronicles. It's been great talking to you again today, Keith. As always, we could go on forever, but we will come back soon with another episode. Thank you again for joining.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to coming back sometime.
If you like what you see, hit the thumbs up button, share on your choice of social media platform, and hit subscribe so that Poseidon himself sees to more frequent releases of the Kraken.